The scientists called it Extinction 7, a massive rock. Bigger than any mountain on Earth, flying through space at impossible speed. It was coming straight for the blue planet that humans called home. Every telescope on Earth watched it grow larger each night. Every calculator and computer said the same thing. Impact in 47 days. Total extinction. Governments told their people the truth. There was no point in lying. 7 billion humans looked up at the sky and waited to die. They tried everything. Nuclear weapons, rockets, desperate plans that had no chance of working. Nothing could stop a rock that size moving that fast. The missiles hit the asteroid and did nothing. It kept coming. It did not care about human hopes or human dreams. Children asked their parents why the sky was going to fall. Parents had no answers. Churches filled with people praying. Streets filled with people crying. Some gave up and waited. Others held their families close and whispered goodbye. On the 42nd day before impact, something appeared in Earth's sky. It was not human. It was not from Earth. It was a ship, but not like any ship humans had ever imagined. It looked like it was made of light and crystal, beautiful and strange. It hung above the clouds like a second moon, and the whole world stopped to stare. The beings inside called themselves the Velari. They were ancient. Their civilization had existed for millions of years before humans learned to walk upright. They looked like living crystals, tall and thin, with bodies that caught light and turned it into rainbows. They did not eat or sleep the way humans did. They moved slowly and spoke in musical tones that made humans feel calm. The Velari were on a pilgrimage. Every 1,000 years, their people traveled across the galaxy to reach a place called the Celestial Veil. It was a beautiful nebula, a cloud of colored gas and light where old Velari went to complete their life cycle. It was their most sacred journey. They had not planned to stop at Earth. Humans were unknown to them. But the Velari sensed the fear and sadness coming from the small blue planet. They sensed 7 billion hearts breaking at once, and they could not ignore it. Their ships surrounded the asteroid. It's called Extinction 7. The Velari used technology that humans could not understand. Energy wrapped around the massive rock. Light pulsed. The asteroid began to shake. Then it shattered. Pieces flew apart in every direction. But the Velari guided them away from Earth. What was once a planet killer became harmless dust. Spreading out into the emptiness of space, the danger was gone. Earth was safe. Humanity watched this miracle happen. They saw the crystal ships work their magic. They saw their death become nothing but sparkling dust against the stars. And then they saw the Velari prepare to leave. The humans begged them to stay. They offered everything they had. Gold, land, knowledge, anything the Velari wanted. The humans wanted to thank them, to repay them. To give something back for the gift of survival, the Velari refused it all. Their leader, a being of pale blue crystal named Eldest Voice, sent one final message to Earth. The words were simple. We do not save lives for payment. We save lives because they are precious. Go forward, young species. Grow. Learn. Be kind to others as we have been kind to you. This is all we ask. Then the crystal ships turned away from Earth and continued their sacred journey to the Celestial Veil. They never looked back. They never asked for anything. They simply gave humanity its future and disappeared into the stars. On Earth, everything changed. The day of salvation became a holiday. The Velari were put into history books, into songs, into the hearts of every human alive. Parents told their children the story. Those children grew up and told their own children. The words "Remember the Velari" were carved into monuments that reached toward the sky. But it went deeper than memory. It became part of what it meant to be human. Humans had always understood debt. If someone saved your life, you owed them. If someone helped you when you had nothing, you remembered. This was human nature. And now, the entire species owed a debt that could never be measured. Every human life, every baby born, every laugh and every tear, for the rest of human history, existed because the Velari had been kind. The debt was written into human law. Any Velarai who came to human space would be treated as honored guests forever. Any request from the Velarai would be answered. Any threat to the Velarai would be treated as a threat to humanity itself. Centuries passed. Humans grew stronger. They built ships of their own and reached out into the galaxy. They met other species, some friendly and some not. They built colonies on distant worlds. They became a power in the galactic community. But they never forgot Ambassador. Kira Vasquez had heard the story since she was a little girl. Her grandmother had told her about the day the sky almost fell. Her mother had taken her to the Monument of Gratitude on her 10th birthday. The words "Remember the Velarai" were tattooed on her heart even if they were not on her skin. Now she sat in her office on Luna Station, handling boring diplomatic work, trade agreements, border disputes, the normal business of a spacefaring civilization. She was tired and looking forward to going home. Then her communication screen lit up with an emergency signal. The frequency was old, ancient. It had been programmed into human systems 300 years ago and never used. Kira stared at it for a long moment, not believing what she was seeing. It was from the Velarai. She opened the transmission with shaking hands. The message was broken and weak, traveling across impossible distances. But the words were clear enough. This is eldest voice of the Velarai. "We are being hunted. Something comes for us. Something called the Hollow Swarm. Our peaceful ways cannot stop it. Our people are dying. We have never asked anything of anyone. But now, in our darkest hour, we remember the young species we once saved. We remember humanity. Please, if the debt we never claimed means anything, help us." The message ended with coordinates. The Velarai homeworld, millions of light years away. Kira Vasquez sat frozen in her chair. Her heart pounded. Her hands would not stop shaking. For 300 years, humanity had waited for this moment. They had promised. They had sworn. The debt would be repaid. She reached for her emergency channel to Earth Command. Her voice was steady, even as tears rolled down her cheeks. "This is Ambassador Vasquez. Priority Alpha. Get me everyone. The Velarai are calling in their debt." The greatest mobilization in human history was about to begin. The news spread across human space, like fire through dry grass. Within 1 hour of Ambassador Vasquez sending her message, every human government knew. Within 2 hours, every military base was on high alert. Within 6 hours, something unprecedented began to happen. Humans started to move. Not just soldiers. Not just military ships. Everyone. Everything. Cargo ships were emptied and fitted with weapons. Passenger vessels were converted into troop carriers. Mining stations shut down and sent their workers to join the gathering fleet. Colony worlds that had spent decades building defenses began taking apart their own weapons platforms to mount on ships heading toward Velarai's space. On Earth, recruitment stations were overwhelmed. Lines stretched around buildings and down streets. Old veterans who had not held a weapon in 20 years showed up asking to serve. Young people who had never considered military life pushed their way to the front. Families said goodbye to sons and daughters, husbands and wives, knowing they might never see them again, and still more ships launched. More weapons were built. More humans answered the call. The Galactic Council watched this with growing disbelief. The Council was the closest thing the galaxy had to a government. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss trade, borders, and conflicts. They had been watching humanity for decades, trying to understand these strange creatures from the small blue planet. Now they gathered in an emergency session to discuss what the humans were doing. And none of them could make sense of it. Elder Thorax of the Dominion spoke first. His species was one of the oldest in the galaxy. They were tall beings with gray skin and 4 arms, known for their cold logic and careful planning. Thorax had lived for over 800 years and had seen many strange things, but this confused even him. "The humans are emptying their territories," he said, looking at reports on his screen. "They are removing defensive systems from their border worlds. They are sending their entire military force toward Velarai space. This is not strategy. This is madness. Ambassador Keth, a small furry creature from the Merchant Federation, nodded in agreement. The economic impact alone will set them back 50 years. They are spending resources they do not have. They are abandoning profitable trade routes. For what? A debt from 300 years ago? The humans who were saved are long dead. This makes no logical sense. Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. The representatives whispered to each other, all saying the same thing. The humans had lost their minds. High Counselor Cyrix, being made of living metal who led the council, called for silence. Perhaps we are missing something. Let us ask the humans directly. Summon their representative. Admiral Chen Wei was the highest-ranking human military officer in the region. He was 57 years old, with gray hair and a face marked by decades of service. When he walked into the council chamber, every eye turned to watch him. He did not look like a man leading his species to destruction. He looked calm, certain. There was something in his eyes that made several council members uncomfortable, though they could not say why. High Counselor Cyrix spoke with careful diplomacy. Admiral Chen, the council has observed your species' mobilization with great interest. We wish to understand your intentions. Chen Wei stood straight and still. Our intentions are simple. The Velarai are under attack. We are going to help them. But surely you understand the risks, Elder Thorax interrupted. The Hollow Swarm has destroyed 17 civilizations. 17. Species far older and more powerful than humanity have been consumed. You are sailing towards certain death. We are aware of the swarm's record. Then why? Ambassador Keth demanded. Why throw away everything you have built? The Velarai saved humans who died centuries ago. You owe them nothing. The debt, if it ever existed, has expired. Admiral Chen Wei looked at the small merchant with an expression that was hard to read. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried to every corner of the chamber. You do not understand humans at all, do you? The chamber fell silent. 300 years ago, we were nothing. A young species on a small planet, about to be wiped from existence. We had no power. No way to save ourselves. We were helpless and we were going to die. Chen Wei paused, letting the words sink in. Then the Velarai came. They did not know us. They gained nothing by helping us. They simply saw a species in pain and chose to act. They gave us our future. Every human child born in 3 centuries exists because of their kindness. Elder Thorax waved a hand dismissively. Sentimentality. Your ancestors were saved? Yes. But you are not your ancestors. You have your own lives, your own concerns. It is illogical to sacrifice yourself for a debt you did not personally incur. Chen Wei smiled. It was not a friendly smile. You mistake gratitude for weakness, he said. You see our mobilization and call it foolish? You look at our abandoned defenses and see opportunity. Perhaps you are already planning to take our territories while we are gone? Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The thought had crossed more than a few minds. But you do not understand what we are, Chen Wei continued. When a human owes a debt, truly owes it in their heart, it becomes part of their soul. We do not forget. We cannot forget. The Velarai gave us everything we have and everything we will ever be. Now they are dying. And you think logic will stop us from answering. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of being after being. The Velarai gave us our future. We will give them theirs. Or we will die screaming in the attempt. This is not negotiable. This is not open for debate. This is what humans are. Ambassador Keth laughed nervously. You are throwing your species away for pride. For emotion. You cannot defeat the Hollow Swarm. No one can. Then we will make the swarm pay for every inch they take. We will make them bleed for every Velarai life. And when the last human falls, the swarm will know they were in a fight. Chen Wei turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing. While we are gone, I suggest you do not touch our worlds. Do not take what is ours. Do not harm our families we leave behind. Is that a threat, Admiral? High Counselor Cyrix asked. Chen Wei looked back over his shoulder. It is a promise. Humans remember kindness, counselor, but we also remember cruelty. We repay both. Then he was gone. The council chamber remained silent for a long time. Some members laughed nervously and called the humans fools. Others updated their invasion plans, seeing easy conquest ahead. But a few, the oldest and wisest, felt something cold settling in their stomachs. They had seen many species rise and fall. They had watched empires burn and civilizations crumble, but they had never seen anything like the look in Admiral Chen Wei's eyes. It was not the look of a man going to die. It was the look of a man going to war. And somewhere deep in space, the hollow swarm continued its approach to Velarai Prime, unaware that something was coming for them, something that did not know how to give up, something that would rather burn than break a promise. Humanity was on its way. The hollow swarm arrived at Velarai. Prime like a disease spreading across healthy flesh, they came through space in numbers that made no sense. Billions of creatures, each one a nightmare of metal and flesh twisted together. They had no ships in the normal sense. Each swarm creature was its own vessel, flying through the void on wings of bone and engines of stolen technology. They moved as one mind, one hunger, one endless appetite that had devoured 17 civilizations and was still not satisfied. The Velarai homeworld was beautiful. Crystal cities rose from purple mountains. Forests of glass trees caught the light of twin suns and scattered rainbows across the land. Rivers of liquid light flowed through. Valleys where Velarai had lived in peace for millions of years now, it was dying. The first wave of swarm creatures crashed into the outer settlements like a hammer striking crystal. Velarai bodies shattered under claws and teeth. Their peaceful songs turned to screams. They had no weapons. They had never needed weapons. Their entire existence had been built on harmony and kindness. Against the hollow swarm, kindness was worthless. Elda's voice, the same being who had saved Earth 3 centuries ago, stood in the central temple of their capital city. He was old now, his crystal body clouded with age, but his mind was still sharp. Around him, thousands of Velarai gathered to sing their death songs. It was their tradition. When the end came, they would meet it with music. "We have contacted the humans," a young Velarai said, her voice trembling. "But they are so far away. Even if they come, it will be too late." Elda's voice looked out the window at the dark shapes filling the sky. "Perhaps. But we had to try." The humans were the only ones who might answer. The only ones who might remember. Why would they remember? "We saved creatures who died long ago. Their descendants owe us nothing, because they are human," eldest voice said softly. "And humans are not like other species. I saw it in them when we saved their world. A fire that burns in their hearts. A stubbornness that refuses to accept the impossible. If anyone will come, it will be them." The sky grew darker as more swarm creatures descended. The singing grew louder. Millions of Velarai voices joining in their final chorus. Glass cities began to crack under the assault. The end was coming. Then reality itself seemed to tear open. Ships exploded out of hyperspace in numbers. That should not have been possible. They came in so fast and so hard that the transition itself created shockwaves that knocked. Swarm creatures spinning through the void. Human ships. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons. Carriers launching fighters like angry hornets. Battle cruisers with guns that glowed with barely contained energy. And behind them, more ships that had no business in a war zone. Cargo vessels with weapons welded to their hulls. Mining ships converted into ramming vehicles. Generation ships meant to carry colonists to new worlds. Now bristling with every weapon humanity could find, at the head of this impossible armada flew the flagship Remembrance. Admiral Chinwei stood on its bridge, looking at the tactical display showing the swarm's position. His officers moved with practiced efficiency around him. No one spoke. No one needed to. "All ships," Chenwei said, his voice calm and cold. "This is Admiral Chen. Today we repay a debt 300 years old. Today we show the galaxy what human gratitude looks like. All ships, full advance. Attack pattern Omega. No retreat. No surrender. Make them pay for every Velari they have touched. The human fleet surged forward. The hollow swarm paused. In 17 conquests across 3 galaxies, nothing had ever charged at them. Prey ran, prey hid. Prey begged for mercy before being consumed. These creatures, these humans, were flying directly into the swarm's teeth with weapons firing. Captain Yuki Tanaka commanded the destroyer Vengeance. She had joined the military because her great-grandmother had been alive on the day that Velari saved Earth. She had grown up on stories of the crystal ships that appeared in humanity's darkest hour. Now she was here to return the favor. She opened a channel that broadcast on all frequencies. Military and civilian, human and alien. Her voice carried across the battlefield. Attention, hollow swarm. You have threatened those under humanity's protection. This is not a warning. This is not a negotiation. You have made a terrible mistake. You have attacked the Velari, and now humanity has come to collect. Then she ordered her ship forward at full speed, directly into the densest concentration of swarm creatures. All across the battle, human ships did the same. They crashed into swarm formations with guns blazing. Fighters weaved between nightmare creatures, firing until their weapons overheated, then ramming when they had nothing left. Larger ships took hits that should have destroyed them and kept fighting, held together by emergency repairs and pure stubborn will. On Velari Prime, Eldest Voice watched in stunned silence. The swarm had stopped advancing. The endless tide of monsters that had been about to wash over his world was now tangled in combat with human forces. Explosions lit up the sky like new stars being born. Human war cries echoed across communication channels, mixing with the swarm's alien screams. They came. A young Velari whispered in disbelief. They actually came. Not just came, Eldest Voice said, his ancient voice filled with wonder. Look at them. They are not fighting to hold position. They are not fighting to defend. They are attacking. They are pushing the swarm back. It was true. Despite being outnumbered, despite facing an enemy that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than humanity, the human fleet was advancing. Slowly, painfully, leaving burning wrecks and floating bodies behind. But advancing, a human destroyer, its engines failing and its hull torn open, used its last power to ram a swarm hive node. The explosion took out hundreds of swarm creatures. The destroyer's crew died instantly. Their final transmission was one word, repeated over and over. Remember, remember, remember. The ground human drop pods began to fall. Soldiers in heavy armor crashed into Velari cities, not to hold defensive positions, but to hunt. They moved through streets filled with swarm creatures, firing and fighting and dying. Pushing the monsters back inch by bloody inch, Sergeant Marcus Cole led a squad through what had been a Velari market. Beautiful crystal structures lay shattered around them. Swarm creatures lurked in the shadows. Someone shouted. A swarm drone leaped from hiding, all claws and teeth. Cole shot it out of the air, then shot 2 more behind it. His squad advanced over the bodies. "Sir, we're taking heavy casualties," his corporal reported. "Command says we can fall back to the landing zone." Cole looked around at his soldiers. Young faces. Scared faces. But not one of them was running. "Did the Velari fall back when they saved Earth?" he asked. "No, sir." "Then neither do we. Forward, always forward. We didn't come here to survive. We came here to repay." The squad moved deeper into the city, hunting. Above the planet, the battle raged on. Human ships burned. Human soldiers died. The swarm kept coming, their numbers seeming endless. But something was changing. The swarm's advance had stopped completely. For the first time in 17 conquests, they were not gaining ground. These strange creatures, these humans, would not break, would not run, would not stop, and deep in the collective consciousness of the hollow swarm, an unfamiliar sensation began to grow. They had consumed species that begged, species that fought briefly, then surrendered. Species that tried to bargain or negotiate or flee, but these humans did none of those things. They just kept coming, kept fighting, kept dying with weapons in their hands and defiance in their hearts. For the first time in its ancient existence, the hollow swarm began to wonder if it had made a mistake. The Galactic Council watched the battle through long-range sensors, and they did not understand what they were seeing. The footage showed human soldiers boarding swarm vessels, not defending, not retreating, boarding. They cut their way through living walls of flesh and metal. They fought hand-to-hand with creatures that had evolved for millions of years to be perfect killing machines. They died in terrible ways, and they kept going. "What are we looking at?" Ambassador Keth whispered. His fur had gone pale with shock. "This is not how species behave. This is not how war works." On the screen, a human sergeant had lost his left arm to a swarm creature's bite. The footage was clear enough to show his face. He was not screaming. He was not panicking. He was using his remaining hand to choke the creature that had wounded him, strangling it while his own blood sprayed across the walls. His mouth was open. He was shouting something. Elder Thurix activated the audio. The sergeant's voice filled the council chamber. "This is for my daughter. This is for Earth. This is for the debt we owe. Come on, you monsters. I've got one hand left, and I'm not done." The creature died. The sergeant grabbed a weapon from a fallen comrade and kept moving deeper into the swarm ship. He was bleeding heavily. He would not survive much longer. He did not seem to care. High Counselor Sirix's metallic voice was quieter than usual. "How long has he been fighting?" 17 hours, an aide reported. "Most human soldiers have been in continuous combat for at least 12 hours. They are rotating positions, treating wounds, and returning to combat immediately. They have no reserve forces. Everyone is fighting. It is impossible. No species can maintain combat effectiveness for that duration. Their bodies should be failing. Their minds should be breaking." Another screen showed a different scene. A human pilot, her fighter badly damaged, was flying directly at a swarm hive carrier. The carrier was massive, a living fortress that controlled thousands of swarm drones. Her fighter was tiny by comparison. Her ship's systems were failing. She had no weapons left. But she kept flying forward. "Tension fleet," her voice came through, steady and clear. "I'm going in. I can take out their command node. Tell my mom the debt is paid. Tell her I love her. Tell her I was proud to be here." Then she accelerated. Her fighter hit the hive carrier's central brain at full speed. The explosion was massive. The carrier began to drift, dead. The thousands of drones it controlled went still and confused. The human fleet cheered, but not for long. There was too much fighting still to do in the council chamber. No one spoke for a long time. "They are dying," Elder Thorix finally said. "They are dying by the thousands, and they are celebrating. They are thanking each other for the honor of dying. Look at this, Ambassador." Keth pointed to a tactical display. "The human fleet has lost 40% of its ships. Any sane commander would retreat, regroup, negotiate. Admiral Chen Wei has ordered all remaining forces to advance." The display showed Chen Wei's latest message to his fleet. "We did not come here to survive. We came here to repay. All ships continue attack. The swarm must learn the price of threatening our friends." Something was changing in the battle. The hollow swarm's advance had not just stopped. It was reversing. The humans were pushing them back. This should not have been possible. The swarm had numbers, experience, and biological weapons that had overcome every defense they had ever encountered. But humans fought in ways the swarm had never seen. They adapted in real time. When one tactic failed, they invented new ones within minutes. They shared information constantly, learning from each death, turning every loss into knowledge that helped others survive. They captured swarm biotech and immediately began turning it into weapons against its creators. On the ground, human scientists worked in mobile labs just kilometers from active combat. They studied swarm corpses, figured out weaknesses, and broadcast the information to every soldier. A virus that slowed swarm healing was created, deployed within 3 hours of discovering the vulnerability. But it was more than tactics. It was something deeper. The swarm had a collective consciousness. Millions of minds linked together, sharing thoughts and feelings. They had consumed 17 civilizations. They knew what fear felt like in their victims. They knew what despair tasted like. What they felt from the humans was different. Sergeant Marcus Cole, still fighting despite wounds that should have killed him, led his squad into a swarm breeding ground. Eggs filled the chamber, thousands of new monsters waiting to hatch. Any other species would have been horrified, would have fled or frozen. Cole smiled. "Boys and girls," he said to his squad, "looks like someone left us a present. Burn it all." They destroyed the eggs with fire and explosives, laughing and joking as they worked. They were exhausted. They were wounded. They were probably going to die before the day was over, and they were having the time of their lives. This terrified the swarm more than any weapon. These creatures, these humans, did not just accept death. They embraced it. They rushed toward danger instead of away from it. Pain made them fight harder. Loss made them angrier. Each fallen human seemed to multiply the ferocity of the survivors. A whisper began to spread through the swarm's collective mind. It started as a question: what are these things? It grew into something else. Something the swarm had never experienced before. Fear on the bridge of the remembrance. Admiral Chen Wei received updated casualty reports. 60% of his fleet was gone. Over 2 million human soldiers had died. More were dying every minute. His face showed nothing. His voice remained steady. Status of Velari evacuation. 70% of civilian population has been moved to safe zones, sir. The ground forces are holding the perimeter, and the swarm. Their advance on the planet has been stopped, sir. They're actually pulling back in several sectors. Our forces are pursuing. Chen Wei nodded slowly. Then we continue. All ships, all forces, maintain pressure. Do not let them regroup. Do not let them rest. They came here thinking we were prey. Show them what predators look like. Human fleet, battered and bleeding. Surged forward again, in orbit above Velari Prime. Something unprecedented was happening. Swarm creatures were fleeing. Not tactically retreating, fleeing. Running from the human ships that hunted them through the debris fields of destroyed vessels. The swarm did not flee, had never fled. But something in the collective consciousness had broken. The endless hunger that drove them forward was being overwhelmed by a new sensation. A desperate need to get away from these impossible creatures who would not stop, would not die, would not be conquered. A human cruiser, its hull breached in a dozen places, chased a group of fleeing swarm into an asteroid field. The captain was wounded, half her crew dead, but she kept pursuit. "Running won't help you?" she broadcast on all frequencies. "You threatened the Velari. You threatened our family. There is nowhere in this galaxy you can hide from us. Nowhere you can go that we won't follow. You wanted to consume us? Let's see how you handle being hunted." The cruiser destroyed the fleeing swarm one by one. The footage spread across the galaxy. Species who had laughed at humanity's foolish mission watched in growing horror. This was not a battle. This was a statement. Humanity was telling the universe exactly what happened to anyone who threatened those under human protection. The message was simple. The message was terrifying. Humans remember, and humans repay. On Velari Prime, Elda's voice watched human soldiers defend his people with their lives. He watched them die with Velari names on their lips, screaming about debts and honor and promises kept. "What have we awakened?" he whispered. "What did we create when we saved their world?" The young Velari beside him had no answer. But somewhere in his crystal heart, he was very, very glad that the humans were on their side. Silence fell over Velari Prime. The guns had stopped firing. The screams had ended. The constant roar of battle that had filled the world for 3 terrible days finally faded into nothing. In its place came a quiet so deep it seemed to press against the ears. Ambassador Kira Vasquez stood on a hill overlooking what had once been a beautiful crystal city. Now it was ruins, shattered glass, mixed with the bodies of swarm creatures and the fallen heroes who had killed them. Human flags flew from broken spires. Medical teams moved through the debris, searching for survivors behind her. The sky was clear. No more swarm creatures blocked out the stars. They were gone. Not defeated. Not driven back. Gone, destroyed, hunted to extinction. The hollow swarm. Terror of 17 civilizations, consumer of worlds beyond counting, had been broken against the wall of human fury. When the final battle ended, humanity had not stopped. They had pursued fleeing swarm elements across 4 star systems, running them down one by one, till nothing remained. The cost was carved into every human face. 62% of the military forces humanity had sent were dead. 3.7 million soldiers would never go home. Thousands of ships drifted as empty tombs through velarized space. The economic damage would take decades to repair. Colonies had been left defenseless, territories unguarded. Years of progress sacrificed, and every human who had survived would tell you it was worth it. Kira walked down the hill toward the central temple, the only velarized structure still standing intact. Human soldiers had defended it with their bodies, forming walls of flesh and metal that the swarm could not break. Many of those soldiers lay buried now in the crystal soil they had died to protect. Inside the temple, Elda's voice waited. The ancient Velari looked different than he had in the historical recordings Kira had studied. Smaller, somehow, dimmer. The light that crystal beings carried within them seemed faded, tired. But his eyes still held the same wisdom that had looked upon Earth 3 centuries ago. Kira knelt before him. Not because protocol demanded it, because her heart demanded it. This being had given her people their future. He had asked nothing in return. And now humanity had given him his future back. Eldest voice, she said, her voice thick with emotion. On behalf of humanity, I bring you news. The hollow swarm is destroyed. Your people are safe. Your world is free. The old crystal being was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice resonated with frequencies that seemed to touch the soul. 300 years ago, we gave you your survival. We thought it was a small thing, a simple kindness. We continued our journey and did not look back. He paused, his ancient form trembling slightly. We did not understand what we had done. We did not understand what we had awakened. Kira looked up at him. What do you mean? We saved a young species on the edge of extinction. We thought they would grow, as all species grow. We thought they would become civilized, as all species become civilized. We thought they would forget us, as all species forget their saviors eventually. Eldest voice moved slowly to a window, looking out at the human soldiers still patrolling his city. But you did not forget. You carved our names into your monuments. You wrote our story into your hearts. And when we called, you came. Not with diplomats and negotiations, not with careful calculations of cost and benefit. You came with everything you had. You threw your bodies against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations far greater than yours. You died by the millions. For us, his light pulsed with something that might have been tears. We gave you your survival. You gave us everything. We did not know humans carried such fire. Kira stood. 300 years ago, you asked nothing of us. You simply saved us and continued your journey. You told us to be kind to others as you were kind to us. She paused, allowing herself a small smile. Consider the debt paid. On the other side of the galaxy, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The chamber was fuller than it had ever been. Every species with any influence had sent representatives. They all wanted to understand what had happened. They all wanted to know what to do next. The footage played on massive screens. Human soldiers fighting to the last breath. Human ships ramming into enemies rather than retreat. Human commanders ordering advances into certain death without hesitation. And at the end, human forces pursuing the fleeing swarm with relentless fury. The hollow swarm, which had conquered 17 civilizations, had been erased from existence. By a species that most of the council had dismissed as emotional primitives, Elder Therix of the Dominion sat very still in his seat. Before the battle, he had made plans. Detailed plans. While the foolish humans threw away their military on a sentimental mission, the Dominion would move into human territory. They would take colonies, resources, power. The humans would return, if they returned at all, to find themselves reduced to a minor species under Dominion control. Those plans were now ashes. Thurix quietly ordered all Dominion forces to stand down. He sent messages to his government recommending a full review of their human policy. Whatever humanity was, it was not what he had thought. And provoking them seemed suddenly like a very bad idea. He was not alone. The Cathari Syndicate, known for their predatory trade practices and occasional piracy, sent tribute to Earth before the human fleet had even left Velari's space. Gold, technology, star maps. Gifts offered without request, without negotiation, without any expectation of return. Just offerings laid at the feet of a species they now understood they had badly underestimated. Across the galaxy, species updated their diplomatic protocols. Warning flags were added to human files. Notes about their military capabilities were revised dramatically upward. And everywhere in private conversations and secret councils, the same question was asked: what if the humans decide we are their enemies? 3 weeks after the battle, humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Council requested permission to address the full assembly. High Counselor Serix granted it immediately. No one considered refusing. Ambassador Helena Cruz walked to the center of the chamber. She was an older woman, gray-haired and dignified. She had not been at the battle, but she had lost 2 children there. Their names were tattooed on her wrist where she could see them whenever she gestured. Representatives of the Galactic Council, she began, I come before you not to boast of victory or demand recognition. I come to deliver a message that humanity wants every species to hear. The chamber was absolutely silent. 300 years ago, the Velari saved our world. They asked nothing in return. They simply extended kindness to strangers they had never met. We have spent 3 centuries trying to become worthy of that kindness, trying to be the species they believed we could become. She paused, looking around at the faces watching her. What you saw at Velari Prime was gratitude. That was humanity repaying a debt of honor. We lost millions of our people. We sacrificed decades of progress. We gave everything we had because we owed everything we were. Ambassador Cruz's eyes hardened. Let this serve as notice to all species in this council and beyond. Humanity remembers. We remember kindness, and we remember cruelty. We repay both. What you saw us do for the Velari, we would do for any species that helped us in our time of need. But understand this as well. What you saw at Velari Prime was gratitude. That was how we treat our friends. The chamber seemed to grow colder. Pray you never see what we do to our enemies. Ambassador Cruz turned and walked out of the chamber. No one spoke. No one moved. The screen still showed footage of human soldiers hunting swarm creatures through asteroid fields, of human ships chasing fleeing enemies across star systems, of human flags flying over the corpses of monsters. High Counselor Serix finally broke the silence. This session is adjourned. The representatives filed out slowly, many of them looking over their shoulders at the screens. Some were already sending messages to their governments. Recommendations, warnings, suggestions that perhaps some treaties should be renegotiated, some insults apologized for, some hostile actions reconsidered. On Earth, the survivors returned to heroes' welcomes. Parades filled the streets. Monuments were planned. The names of the fallen were carved into walls that stretched for kilometers. Children born that year were given names from the battle. Marcus, Yuki, Chen, and everywhere, in every city and colony and ship, humans told the story. Not just the story of the battle. The whole story. How the Velari had saved them from extinction. How humanity had waited 300 years to repay the debt. How they had given everything to honor a promise made by ancestors long dead. The story spread beyond human space. Other species heard it. Some laughed at first, calling it propaganda or exaggeration. Then they saw the footage. Then they heard the casualty counts. Then they understood. Humanity was not like other species. They did not forget. They did not forgive. They did not calculate costs and benefits when someone they loved was threatened. They simply acted. With all the fury and determination their strange little species could generate, the galaxy had a new power to consider. Not because of human technology or human resources or human military strength. Those things could be measured and countered. What could not be measured was the fire that burned in human hearts, the stubbornness that refused to accept impossible odds, the loyalty that transcended generations and logic and self-preservation in the Council archives. Human diplomatic files were updated with a new classification: not aggressive, not expansionist, not any of the usual categories, simply do not provoke, and in crystal cities rebuilt from ruins. Velarai children learned a new song. It told of the dark time when the swarm came. It told of the strange beings who arrived from across the stars, beings who fought and died and burned with impossible determination, beings who remembered a kindness from centuries past and crossed the universe to repay it. The song ended with a warning that was also a promise. If you are ever in darkness, if you are ever without hope, look to the stars. And remember that somewhere out there are the humans. They remember kindness. They repay debts. And they never, ever forget. The galaxies had shaken when humanity went to war. Terror had spread when species understood what humans truly were. But in the aftermath, something else spread too. A strange kind of hope. Because if humanity would do that for a species that had helped them once, 300 years ago, maybe, the galaxy was not as cold and dark as everyone had always believed. Maybe kindness mattered after all.